Welcome to Football Sleeps, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're still inching towards being viral. We're racing towards being properly caffeinated, and we're already a properly sponsored weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and a fan base that's about to find out what football never sleeps or eats. I'm Eric Hansen in South Bend and angling towards an NIL deal with Keurig. He's Tyler James in LaPorte and celebrating a Monon Bell victory, I think. Together, we are the nocturnal word salad avoiders and content creators at blueandgold.com. On tonight's show, we're going to take a look at Marcus Freeman's press conference today, which included some personnel updates. We're going to give you a big picture view of Notre Dame with 2 regular season games left. And we'll look at the playoff snapshot for tomorrow night. And as always, your questions, comments, and quips. So start filling up that question portal. This is
Football Never Sleeps.
Eric, I can assure you that I am always celebrating a Monon Bell victory. Even after 4 straight years of DePaul beating Wabash, it's worth celebrating. So we'll see how my DePaul Tigers do in the Division III playoffs. But it was nice to end the regular season with another win over Wabash. As Eric mentioned, Football Never Sleeps is presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. The holiday season is here, and Academy Sports and Outdoors has the legendary gifts you need at undefeatable prices every day. Shop in-store or online at academy.com to save on gifts on everybody's list, from football jerseys and basketball hoops to fire pits and deer stands. The most wonderful time of year happens here. This Christmas, get the gift of fun from Academy Sports and Outdoors. Wanted to thank everyone for tuning in on their Monday night, watching us live. Shout out to Sid, Brian, T. Dawson, Scott. Brian's already loading up the question queue. Appreciate everyone chiming in this evening.
Mike Singer, too. Hit the thumbs up on the video, he says.
Hit the thumbs up on the video. What's up, Mike? We appreciate everyone watching this on replay as well. No matter when you're watching this, make sure that you hit the like button, as Mike Singer told you, and subscribe to the channel. You should also consider subscribing to us over at blueandgold.com. As I mentioned last week, in October alone, as a site, we published 269 premium stories. So if you're worried about not having enough content, we have that covered for you. New users can sign up for the first week of an annual subscription for just $1. Head to blueandgold.com, hit the join now button at the top of the page, and take advantage of that new subscriber deal. All right, Eric, let's get started tonight with our discussion of Marcus Freeman's Monday press conference. He met with reporters today to review the Pitt game and look ahead to Saturday's game against Syracuse. What were your biggest takeaways from the press conference?
My biggest takeaways were the CJ Carr stuff. He talked about what maybe the average fan doesn't see in CJ Carr behind the numbers, what was kind of going on behind the scenes that made Notre Dame so successful at times on offense against a really good defense. Thought the red shirting stuff and philosophy was interesting when he was talking specifically about Jaden Greathouse, but really about all the players that have been kind of injured for long term, the approach with that. And then the stuff about Steve Angeli and how much he meant to the program and how much he considers that kind of a forever relationship. It didn't change when he transferred. How about you? What'd you like from today's press conference, other than my coat that I wore, my winter coat?
Well, I hate to say your coat got outshined by Jack Sobel's shirt.
Jack Sobel's shirt.
Marcus Freeman didn't compliment your coat, at least that I heard. At least on the live mic, he complimented.
He
Jack
said
Sobel.
it with his eyes, but on the live mic, he did compliment Jack Sobel's shirt.
All right, and I looked up the price of Jack Sobel's shirt, and I need to get paid what Jack Sobel's getting paid, because that was a pricey shirt. But I guess it's worth a Marcus Freeman shout out on the press conference. But in terms of things Marcus Freeman said that stood out to me, I was the Angeli thing I thought was good. I think it speaks to his approach to being a football coach and what he thinks matters about the profession that he's in. I liked what he discussed in terms of things he's looking for in the next 2 weeks to measure improvement. He didn't offer specific numbers, and he said he didn't necessarily have numbers in mind, but certain things like execution errors or missed assignments, cleaning those things up. He wants to improve upon that. He likes to look at field position battles and the turnover margin. And so that makes a lot of sense, especially with Notre Dame committing a couple turnovers this past weekend against Pitt. That's an area of improvement that Notre Dame can clean up. Not a lot of Syracuse discussion during today's press conference, and I don't know that we'll spend a ton of time talking about Syracuse tonight either, though we will dedicate a little bit of time. But a pretty interesting press conference overall, I thought.
Well, let me jump in with a couple of things before we go to either questions or more of us. A couple of things I should note. Syracuse is starting a true freshman at quarterback against Notre Dame, Joseph Filardi. They have demoted Ricky Collins. I believe this will be Filardi's second start. I think he started against North Carolina. He came to Syracuse as a lacrosse/football player. And then the 10:30 start for the Stanford, 10:30 Eastern time start for the Stanford game, which is what my little reference, and you guys are going to find out what football never sleeps really means. We already know what it is like, but nobody's sleeping that night for sure. And we will have post-game shows on both of our YouTube channels after that game.
Yeah, there's they gave us plenty of time to complain about that 10:30 p.m. start too. At least we don't have to wait for another week to find that out. But yeah, that's going to be interesting, and it's almost like having a full day off before they actually get to playing the football game on Eastern time. So that will be pretty wild and wrap up the regular season across college football essentially that evening. I wanted to hit the injury report real quick before we dive into some questions. Notre Dame had no new injuries to report out of Saturday's game against Pitt. Most of the players who missed the Pitt game have already been declared out for the Syracuse game. The lone exception is wide receiver Jaden Greathouse, who was listed as questionable. However, Marcus Freeman indicated the Irish would like to hold him out of the last two games to allow him to redshirt if possible. What do you think of that development and decision?
I've gone kind of both ways on this. After hearing him describe it, I like it. I think the only advantage to bringing him back early and burning that redshirt year was it could get shake a little bit out of the rust. You know, he hasn't played since the Arkansas game, which was on September 27th. And so his first game action theoretically would be the first playoff game if Notre Dame is fortunate enough to make the playoff. So I could see some advantages, and I've stated that. But if he's still not 100%, then yeah, I would say sit him out these next two games. The offense has been operating without him, and then he'll just get up to speed and do really well in the semifinals and the championship game.
Yeah, it certainly makes sense in the fact that he's not needed, right? Notre Dame doesn't need Jaden Greathouse to beat Syracuse or Stanford. It doesn't help the conspiracy theorists who believe Jaden Greathouse has been trying to redshirt all season since the fourth game of the season. I do worry about the level of impact he'll actually make in the postseason after missing that much time, and combined with the fact that it wasn't like there was obvious chemistry between him and CJ Carr to start the season, at least during games. Now, maybe there was more of that on the practice field that we just didn't see showing up on Saturdays. But he's when he returns to play, I think he will be a bit of an enigma in terms of how much of an impact he'll make, how much Notre Dame will try to get him involved, and what he can do to help Notre Dame. Certainly he's a talented player, but Will Pauling has established himself pretty well in that slot position over the last several weeks.
Right. He is not going to make a difference in what their overall record is in their seeding going into the playoff. The one thing I thought was, is he really going to be a 5-year player? And I guess sometimes guys surprise you, especially with the money structure that there is these days. He seemed more likely to be a 3-year player than a 5-year player had he stayed healthy. But I guess it's a good thing to have, especially if you have another injury down the road. You know, it gives you another year to maybe prove yourselves for the NFL. So I'm buying it now.
Yeah, I think, well, unrelated to this and injuries in general, although I guess you could sort of tie it into Cooper Flanagan. Marcus Freeman confirmed what we believe, that Notre Dame plans to play James Flanagan in just one of the last 2 games to allow him to qualify for redshirt. He hit his 3rd game against Pittsburgh, and I thought had an important role. What did you think of Flanagan's play? Flanagan with an I, not Flanagan with an A, against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, especially with Cooper Flanagan with an A out, and maybe he's not going to be back before the regular season ends. Mike Singer and I were doing the immediate post game show, and Mike brought up some film, and he's like, "Is that James Flanagan 88?" And I'm like, "Wow, that was a great block on the Jeremiah Love spin move for a touchdown run." And then you go back and you kind of look over it and you say, he did pretty well. And then Marcus Freeman confirmed that today, that they are really happy with him, how his progression. I know you wrote a complete story about it, and I think it's really worthy because it gives Notre Dame another gear. It gives them a guy that they can trust in power formations as a second tight end. And you brought up another good point. This allows Eli Reardon to be a little bit more versatile in his role and maybe get some more mismatches with a guy that can play traditional tight end. So I thought that was a really good angle today.
Yeah, frankly, and part
You're
of
welcome.
well, thank you, thank you. I think part of why I think it's important is because I'm not sure that Ty Washington has done a good enough job as a blocker, and
I agree.
Used 2 tight end sets at a high rate from time to time, but Washington being that second tight end, I think. Granted, we're talking about a much smaller sample size with James Flanagan, but I think if you can get the level of blocking that he had against Pitt in future games as a second tight end, or even a third tight end in like short yardage situations, I think that is valuable. You mentioned the Love run. He pulled around from the left side to be a lead blocker along with Sullivan Absher on that play. He had some good one-on-one blocks later. The 10-yard run that Jeremiah Love had when Notre Dame was backed up near its own goal line, he had a nice block that was sort of like the leading block to that side as well. So yeah, he even had one pancake block on the play that Kirby Lambert got a holding penalty on, so it wiped out the run. But I thought we saw some good things from him, and the way that Notre Dame wants to use Eli Reardon can expand too with those things like you mentioned, and him being able to motion all over the place and line up in the slot, line up sort of in a wing position behind Flanagan or to the side of him. There's a lot of different things that Notre Dame can do with Reardon, and they have done a lot of them with Ty Washington, but I think there's a chance it could maybe even be more successful with Flanagan. I for whatever reason, Ty Washington is not appreciated by Pro Football Focus. He did not have good grades last year down at Arkansas, and I think he's.
I don't think it's for whatever reason. I think there is a reason.
Yeah, well, it's surprising to me that if he's as bad as PFF says he is, that Notre Dame would have been like, you know what, James Flanagan, you can't redshirt. We need you to play. But there was a hope maybe that Cooper Flanagan would get back, and
I can answer that.
Split the time between the two. But so to context for Ty Washington, he has the 3rd lowest offensive grade on the team, according to PFF, and the only 2 guys he's above are guys that have played, that are backups and don't play much. So he anyone that has at least 60 snaps has a higher grade than Ty Washington.
And you may have been wondering that rhetorically rather than actually throwing it out there, but I think you and I have talked about where the version of James Flanagan we're seeing now isn't the James Flanagan they were seeing in practice earlier in the year. They kind of kept him in the oven and felt like, okay, he's going to be ready to go in November, late October and November, and that's when we really need him. But when they look at their long-term roster, he's the guy that they feel can be an every down tight end. There's some really good tight ends coming, and they're very confident in terms of being elite pass catchers, but they're not so sure how quickly they'll get to that tight end body where they can be the elite inline blocker. They believe James Franklin can do that for a whole career. That's why it was important for them to redshirt him and then try to milk as much out of him during the stretch run and into the playoff, because he can play in every playoff game and not burn his red shirt. So that was kind of the thinking there.
Well, I don't want anyone to throw tomatoes at you or James Flanagan. You accidentally called him James Franklin, and that is not a name that Notre Dame fans want playing tight end for them. So,
well, James Franklin did have a big day today. He's a heck of a Virginia Tech coach now. So, and Tyler Horka pointed out on Twitter, Notre Dame has games against Virginia Tech in 27 and 28. So that'll be fun.
All right. Let's get into some questions here. First one was a recent one. Sid Irish says, does Eli have any eligibility left?
Does Eli Reardon?
Right, correct.
He does not. He's done after this year. He's cooked.
That is correct. T. Dawson says, is Oregon losing to USC or Washington pretty much the only avenue for Notre Dame to host a first-round playoff game?
No, I think there's other scenarios that can happen. And we're not sure what they're going to be tomorrow. They could be even 10 and not 9 as they are in the AP and the coaches poll, and even in the football writers poll. They're 9 in all of those. I think USC or Washington beat Oregon is one path. And not that these are likely, but that Egg Bowl gets pretty crazy between Mississippi State and Mississippi, and Ole Miss has been living right on some of these really close games they've been involved in. I mean, Washington State took them down to the wire, and they're not very good. Arkansas took them down to the wire. We're driving for the game-winning touchdown when they fumbled. And their defense isn't really good. Their offense is super. And then I think, Oklahoma, even though they just had the big victory, they are very flawed on offense. They're playing a really good Missouri defense, although Jack Sobel with the nice shirt does not think that Missouri has a chance in that game. I'm not so sure, especially if it gets into a turnover differential in Missouri's favor. And then they play LSU, and LSU is a team with nothing to lose, and that has a pretty good defense. They've been in a lot of games against pretty good teams, including Ole Miss. That was a 5-point game. So I think there's some things that can happen that would be beneficial for Notre Dame to get a home game. And I'll leave it there because I know we're going to get into some more playoff talk later.
All right, and I defer to you for playoff knowledge. Brian Habermill says, what short yardage play would you use for 4th and 1? Seems like it would be great to have a play. My favorite with the team is QB power with Love lead blocking.
Well, I'm not telling you, Brian, because then everybody will know and then they'll be ready for it. I think you need to have a stash of different plays that are good. I'll tell you one of that I don't remember who it was, if it was Navy, but somebody I saw playing, they put a guy in motion to be the tush push guy. So as soon as the ball was snapped, he was pushing on the quarterback to get the first down, and it worked. I'm not sure if it was Navy or if it was a different game that I was watching. I do think it's, we had Landon Tengwall on our roundtable show on Sunday, even though he's not part of our staff. It feels like he is now. He's been on so many YouTube shows with, and he's so good at breaking down film. Former offensive lineman from Penn State. And I think he's kind of how you guys tend to feel like it's Notre Dame. Shouldn't Notre Dame be able to get a half a yard with just brute strength and with a quarterback that's not 175 pounds? But I do think variety, you can't just rely on one play. I think there needs to be, but I like your idea, Brian. It's worked better than some of the plays that they've actually used in games. So I'll give you an A on that.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I think that might be the most consistent, even though it didn't work, at least in the season opener against Miami. I'm not sure if it got stopped on another instance or not. So I'm not sure what the play is. I think Notre Dame has been somewhat predictable, even though it's trying to find different things. Like if it's not a run, it's Jordan Faison trying to go to the outside. It's Eli. They try to do it with Eli Raridan, sort of just a quick sprint out for CJ Carr and throw it to the guy. And it's not an easy throw, especially if the defense is playing tight there. And I feel like the defenses that really have anticipated that. It's surprising that Notre Dame can't get Eli Raridan the ball more in the red zone. I know this isn't specific to that, but can't. And I think it comes down to, like, you don't really have much of a play action game. Notre Dame doesn't run a lot of play action. They don't play from under center almost at all. And so I think that pigeonholes you in some ways. If it's not the quarterback run, I think I would still just I'd rather go down with Jeremiah Love having the ball in his hands as if I were a Notre Dame coach, like put Jeremiah Love in the pistol behind CJ Carr. You're not giving away which direction he's running. Snap it and let Jeremiah Love figure it out. I know that hasn't always worked. He bounced it outside on the one play against Pitt to pick up a first down. I think that would be probably what I would do, just because I think he's my best player in that case.
I do think that James Flanagan becoming more involved, especially in the playoff, gives them a little bit more of a power look on some formations too.
Yeah, I think that's important. And part of Notre Dame's issue in short yardage has been that guys from the edge are getting into the backfield so fast that the running backs don't have much time to sort of find a hole when it's not necessarily there. And then it's just a pile up and a guy from behind is wrapping up the guy's legs. All right, Mike's chiming in. Eric, have you ever cooked a turkey leg before? Do you have plans to change that?
I do not have plans to change cooking or eating the turkey leg. Right now, I have two of them. They're smoked turkey legs. They're in the freezer. I plan on thawing them. I've cooked them different ways before. I've cooked it as part of an actual turkey. You're going to laugh that I've actually cooked a turkey before, but having 8 grandkids and having 6 of them for at least 7 years now, I've cooked turkeys before. What I like to do with turkey legs and thighs is put them in the crock pot with a little white wine and some spice rub and let that cook all day and get real tender. That's probably going to be my game plan. But I plan what's more important than how I cook it is how I use it. This would be in our roundtable show Sunday after the Stanford game if Notre Dame is 10-2. This is something I agreed to back on September 14th. I'm going to be waving that turkey leg around, and I'm going to have a little plate of barbecue sauce, and I'm going to dip it in that barbecue sauce and eat it like a savage. So that's my game plan.
I saw some people chiming in on the loose emoji board that, like, well, what kind of punishment is that? I don't think Eric was trying to punish himself.
I wasn't trying to punish. This was the confidence I had that Notre Dame would go 10-2. The one that I made about eating that was not pleasant and had this happen was, I said, I was just tired of all the Marcus Freeman. Oh, what if he goes to LSU? And I said, okay, if Marcus Freeman goes to LSU, I will eat raw crawfish on every YouTube show that I do for a week. So that's the one I would have dreaded. That would have been punishment because I don't even like cooked crawfish.
Oh man, I didn't hear that bet. So maybe you'll be funneling money Marcus's way to make sure he doesn't go to LSU, just to have to avoid that. No, I'm kidding.
You know how much I make.
Yeah, no, I don't
have that kind of money. I don't even have enough money to buy Jack's shirt.
All right. Question here is from Scott Fegan. How many starters are not back next year? And I did pull up the depth chart to sort of help us go through this area.
Okay. Well, you did I'll let you do the math then first.
Well, you count while I name. How's that work?
Okay.
Will Pauling.
Malachi
Sorry for the
Fields.
silence as I scroll down. Eli Raridan.
Okay.
Malachi Fields.
3.
Jeremiah Love. I mean, he would be
4.
a shock if he is back next year. We'll see about Jadarian Price, right? There's a chance he could go pro as well.
Right. We'll give the ones that we know, and then we'll go back and get the guys that are maybes. So that's 4.
Jared Dawson.
Yep. It's 5.
Jason Onye. I mean, he's starting right now.
Yep. 6. And if it were Rubio, it would be the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Gabriel Rubio's in the same boat. Jordan Botello.
7.
And
that's it.
Devontae Smith.
Oh, yeah. Devontae Smith. So 8.
And then maybe James Rendell.
Yeah. I don't think James Rendell is going to get that 3rd year. That Notre Dame does not think he will. So that's 8. And then the maybes. So let's go Jadarian Price, maybe. And we're not talking transfers. Price, I think we're talking guys that might go pro.
Yeah. So Jadarian Price would be there. The offensive lineman, I don't know that. I mean, Billy Strouth, maybe it's just so tough with coming off an injury. I feel like he's Notre Dame's best lineman and best draft prospect that would be draft eligible right now. Maybe Emil Wagner, too, having started for 2 full seasons. Maybe he doesn't want to return. I think he has plenty to still prove at the college level if he wants to. Beyond that, defensively,
I don't think Traore's ready.
No, I don't.
He thinks he is.
I don't think so either. There's not an obvious answer there defensively in terms of early guys. Like, I mean, maybe a Don Schuler is like, you know what, I got 2 years as a starter. I'm going to go ahead and try it, but I don't know that he's seen it as that kind of a prospect. But
Christian Gray could, and people will snicker, but we had Dane Brugler on from The Athletic, their draft analyst, and he thinks Christian Gray with consistency could be a 2nd round pick as high. They like his traits. He had a really good game against Pittsburgh. I'm not saying that he's thinking that. I could see him very easily, especially with his background and his mom wanting to come back and get his degree and be a 4-year guy. So, but
Jalen Sneed, Sid Iris highlighted Jalen Sneed as someone.
Yeah, I mean, I would think he'd be more, if he's not coming back, I could see maybe him getting his degree and wanting to try someplace else. But I mean, he kind of came to that inflection point in December last year and said, you know what, I'm a Notre Dame man, I'm going to stay. So.
All right. I think that runs through all the starters. Sid Irish also asked, sort of off topic, has anyone seen how the Shields building is looking?
Amazing. You can really see the depth in it, and the outside is almost all done. And then they'll start working on, making the inside look good, but it's coming along great. We should probably maybe I'll snap some pictures if it's not too dark when we're doing the player interviews tomorrow.
All right. Well, let's get into some other talk that we have planned to have tonight. Please feel free to send some more questions in. I think we've exhausted all the ones that have been submitted so far. Wanted to sort of check in on our evaluation of Notre Dame's in terms of areas of confidence and concern. Eric, what aspects of this Notre Dame team are you most confident in after 10 games?
I went pretty broad here so I could cover a lot of territory because I'm confident in a lot of areas. So I'll say quarterback play, the running game, and the defense. I mean, Notre Dame has gone from in the hundreds in total defense. They are number 29 today, and they have a really good chance to finish in the top 20. And they are 13th in rush defense, and we haven't seen Notre Dame that high since the end of the 2012 season in rush defense.
Yeah, I included explosive plays, which covers running backs in the running game, wide receivers, and the quarterback play in the passing game. So that's a bit of an all-encompassing thing. I think that I have the most confidence going into a game that Notre Dame's going to have explosive plays on offense, whether it's via Jeremiah Love but more likely rather than and the passing game, whether it's deep passes to Malachi Fields, Jordan Faison, Will Pauling, even KK Smith at times. The way CJ Carr is throwing the deep ball has been impressive and continues to be a strength for Notre Dame's offense. And yeah, really the defense, almost just full stop defense. Notre Dame's defense is something I'm confident in now. The pass rush is good. The coverage has been good. The run defense is improved. I think that across the board, the defense is really improved and not just like gotten back to an acceptable level, but like really shown to be a unit that can carry the team when maybe the offense is going through some struggles. The flip side of that, what aspects of this Notre Dame team are you most concerned about?
The number one isn't a surprise. It's the kicking, kicking. And then the other two, I would say offensive line, and I think they're playing better, but there's certain, when you get into the playoff, there's some edge rushers like Miami has on other teams that are really, really good. And they will see those, and they will see some really, really good guys up the middle too. You're going to see some elite defensive lines. So I'm curious how those matchups will go. The Pitt game was good in that Pitt's linebackers are really strong and their defensive line is good. It's not great like Ohio State's and Texas Tech's and some of the others. And then injury depth. I think there's some spots where Notre Dame could, I don't want to say be in trouble, but they would be tested at certain spots if they had another injury, let's say on the offensive line, for instance, and some other places where just depending on who it was, it would hurt them.
Yeah, we agree in kicking. Like obviously, like I don't think that's a surprise. With the offensive line, I'm more worried about run blocking than pass protection. I know certainly the pass protection wasn't good at the start of the year, but I think those guys have improved. Just the run blocking has been less consistent to me. And even though it's maybe not a fair fight in terms of coming up against stacked boxes a lot, that's what they're going to have to figure out answers to. And I thought they did a decent job against Pitt. But that's something that against top rush defenses that also have top end talent, that I think Notre Dame could have some struggles with. And then the third thing was linebackers and coverage. I think that's something that has been exposed at times this season. Pitt was able to do that with Desmond Reed, the running back, before he got injured. Now everyone's not going to have a running back like Desmond Reed that can do that, but I think there's a chance that teams could find ways to isolate some of Notre Dame's linebackers and take advantage of them in coverage. And then lastly, in which areas have your confidence or concern changed the most throughout the season? What I guess maybe one for each, unless you have more than that. But
well, I'm just going to go with one period, and it's kind of encompasses one position group. It's the pass rush / defensive line. I thought, Marcus was really confident about them in August. And then what we saw in the first couple of games were like, okay, what was Marcus drinking? And then they've kind of turned into that unit. They're up among the leaders in the country in sacks now. And they have been, again, 13th in the country in rush defense. And that's when you have a Navy game in there. If you didn't have to play Navy, they'd be in the top 10 right now. And I'll tell you what, they're playing two teams the next 2 weeks. They have a good chance to be in the top 10 when the playoff starts. So that group has really impressed me.
Yeah, that was where I had highlighted for the thing that my confidence has most improved or increased across the season was the pass rush. I really have a lot of faith in that group, and not just the defensive line, but the way the linebackers get involved with that too. And then the concern would be the run blocking that I was talking about. I think part of that is related to the personnel, Notre Dame being without some of its healthy offensive linemen or injured offensive linemen, and putting a spotlight on some of those guys that are stepping in. But that my confidence in Notre Dame's run blocking has decreased a bit as the season's gone on. All right, let's get into some of these questions. Ron Robert says, guys, do you see Notre Dame going in the portal this year for a kicker, as the kicking game has been shaky at best?
I think they'll definitely have that discussion. And the thing is, they scout every position group with, I can't remember what the number is, but it's like 20 players at every position group. I don't know that they go that deep with kickers, just in case they want to take somebody. But you would think, they would take a look at that. And I think a lot of that's going to be determined how Eric Schmidt finishes off the season. The thing about it, though, is if you don't take one and he gets injured next year, then where are you? So I do think taking a portal kicker and then letting them compete would be a smart thing. The other thing is Eric Schmidt may be the starting punter next year. He is also an elite punter. And again, I do not think James Rendell is going to get that third year, even though he applied for it through the NCAA.
Yeah, I think especially if that's the case, it'd probably behoove Notre Dame to take transfers at both spots, right? At kicker and punter.
Yeah.
Even if Eric Schmidt ends up being one or both, I doesn't happen very often anymore that someone does both. Kyle Brinto is probably the last one who did both for Notre Dame. But I think they need to get a kicker, and if Rendell can't come back, they need to probably get a punter as well. And that doesn't mean that guy has to be the starter, unless it is this guy's a stud. Why wouldn't you start him? You can be open about whether or not he's going to be your starter and compete. And I think Eric Schmidt will deserve a chance to compete for that, but they got to prove it.
And
certainly.
Eric Schmidt will kick off next year, you would think.
Right. Yeah. That he's pretty good at that too. So there's still room for guys at that position for sure. Andy in Georgia says, which unit do you have the most confidence in, the offense or the defense?
Wow, that's a good question. And that should have been an easy answer. That would have been an easy answer.
Yeah, can you imagine
most
pausing?
Of the year? Yeah.
Pausing for that?
Yeah. Against somebody like Ohio State that's really good on both sides of the ball, I'm going to say the offense, but gosh, it's hard. I could flip a coin on that one, and that's saying something about how much the defense has improved. But I would go with the offense just because I think CJ Carr gives them just a little bit more. But man, I have a lot of confidence in the defense.
Yeah, I think I'd go with offense too, just because I think there's so many different things that can happen on offense that Notre Dame can do well. And even though plenty has changed since the beginning of the season, even when Notre Dame was going up against bad or good defenses, the offense didn't crater. I feel like the offense can hold up and still be decent even against bad teams, where I think there's a chance that the defense could just have a bad game. The offense has had some poor performances, but I think has been able to pull things together and make big plays. And I think that's still reliable enough, even against top opponents, that Notre Dame will be capable of doing that. Mike DeVoy says, do we still think there's a chance Shrouth and Charles Jagusa can be back for the playoffs? Billy Shrouth and Charles Jagusa.
I'd say really confident that Billy Shrouth will be. I would say coin flip on Charles Jagusa. And he has surprised Notre Dame both years in terms of him being available in the postseason. He got a little ahead of schedule. I think when he had the cleanup surgery in October, that was kind of the best case scenario, that he could play all the playoff games. But, they have left that open. They could have easily just put him on the he's done for the season kind of thing. So I'd say 50-50 on him, but Shrouth I feel pretty confident about as long as there's not a setback there.
Shepard says the O-line is down 3 starters and Otting had a taped up ankle now. Will Notre Dame be okay in the playoffs with the offensive line?
Well, they're going to have time to heal a little bit too. I mean, that's one advantage of not having to play in a conference championship game is they get an extra week to heal to, I guess if they wanted to practice, but I think they'll use that to heal and so forth. So I think that's going to be helpful. And again, if Shrouth comes back and let's say Otting isn't ready to go, you have Chris Tarrick or you have Sullivan Apsher, who's taken some snaps at center in practice at least. And then if Charles Jagas comes back, and Billy Shrouth, then you all of a sudden have a really good problem and an interesting problem on who's going to be your top 5. But I think right now, if those guys, if there was a setback to Shrouth, if Jagas wasn't coming back, I do think it's concerning. But the good part is there's time to heal.
Yeah, I think particularly Shrouth, like obviously we've seen Charles Jagas play really well without having a lot of time to dust off or get the rust out. I guess like the way he came into the playoffs last year, like that was pretty impressive. So he's obviously capable of doing that. Coming back from an injury, I would feel a little bit better because Billy Shrouth has been playing well this season. I mean, probably played his best game of the season in the game that he got hurt. So probably would feel a little bit more confident in him if he gets back out there, and I think that would be a great benefit for Notre Dame. I do think the offensive line can hold up. I don't know that it's going to be a team that or a unit that sort of dominates, and that's what the hope was that Notre Dame's offensive line could be going into the season. And I'm not sure going into a playoff scenario that Notre Dame could feel like its offensive line will be able to consistently dominate, depending on the opponent. Certainly, like the quality of the defensive line they're going in, so and linebackers would impact their ability to do so. ND in Georgia says, I asked this a couple of weeks back and wanted to see if your answer has changed. Will CJ throw for 3,000 yards in the regular season? I think he has approximately 2,490. I'll double check that.
If that number is accurate and he's got 2 games left, I do not think he'll get there. I think he'll be a little bit short just because I think if these games get out of hand early, they would bring in Kenny Minchie and get him some work. And so I'm not sure that it's going to get to that point.
He has 2,000.
But I think it'll be close.
He has 2,487. So
he's real close there.
Yeah, he was right on with that.
I think just under.
Yeah, I think I said he would last time. I think I'd probably say no, but it wouldn't certainly surprise if he throws for 260 yards in each of the next 2 games. The pass defenses are not good that Notre Dame is facing. And I think there's a chance that those teams will try to do whatever they can to load the box in fear of Notre Dame's running game. So,
yeah, Stanford is good at actually decent against the run. They're awful against the pass. Syracuse is bad at everything. So including the rushing defense. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm looking at their numbers right now. There's in the stats I chart, other than net punting, we'll take that out of it. So there's 23 categories, offense, defense, and special teams. I see a 50, and then the next best number on there is 74, offense or defense. A lot of hundreds,
I think there's more
in the hundreds.
When I was scrolling through looking at stuff earlier, that there's more things over 100 than there are under 100 in terms of where they rank, and that's not where you want to be at with 130 some schools at the FBS level. Excuse me. James Gibbs says, love the show. Thank you, James. We appreciate your support. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Ain says, what about Greathouse? I know we talked about Jaden Greathouse earlier, but I think this question came up when we were talking about guys coming back for the playoffs. So you want to refresh, Ain, what we talked about?
So Jaden Greathouse has played in 4 games this year. Marcus Freeman at the press conference said he's the closest to coming back as he has been throughout this whole process. But at this point, they had a conversation, what's best for the player and for the team. And they feel like sitting him for the last 2 games, even if he's ready to go, allowing him to have a redshirt year and then playing him in the playoff, which you can do. The playoff games don't count against a redshirt year. So that looks like that's what's going to be the plan.
We got one of Eric's favorite line of questions is uniforms. T. Dawson says, I was a big fan of all white unis again. Wonder who makes that call?
Jack Sobel, who had the shirt that Marcus Freeman shouted out today. I have no idea. Tyler, this is in your wheelhouse. It's not mine. I can talk all night about how to prepare turkey legs. I don't know who picks the uniforms.
I'm not 100% certain on this, but I think the captains have some say in that. I think they probably ask those guys to, because they're not going to, unless it's something that there's contractual obligations for, like, this is our Shamrock Series uniform. They're not going to have them pick from the uniform combination something that they don't like. So I think the captains have a say in that. And it was interesting that both of the noon games is when they chose to pull the all whites out. So I don't know if that was a coincidence or intentional, but
well, you know why they bring the whites out? Because it's their signal that it's a must win. Just kidding.
They were telling the opposing team to surrender.
Yeah, that's a Pat Narduzzi shot.
Chris W. says, what year will Notre Dame field their best team? 25, 26, or 27?
There's a lot of people that think it'll be 2026. I don't know that I can look far enough in 2027 just with the transfer portal, but just the way recruiting's going. And then will CJ Carr be here in 2027?
Right.
So I would say 2026 is probably the team that will have the highest expectations going into the year. And that's saying something, because I think Notre Dame was 5 or 6 in the preseason poll.
Yeah, I'd probably say 2026 too. So much of that is quarterback dependent, and that's what you feel the most confident in, that CJ Carr coming back next year. Obviously,
as long as nobody's allowed to go to Wyoming on July 4th.
Oh man, really drudging up the summer chaos that was sprung on the loose emoji board when Charles Jagasa got hurt. But yeah, I just think, because CJ Carr will be here next year, I think that would be the high. You lose Jeremiah Love, and that's what we're anticipating happening. That hurts, but I think Notre Dame has running back talent in its room and can replace some of his production. Probably not going to have the same like electric style plays that Jeremiah Love produces, but I think you can sort of replace that production with a couple guys and make up for it there. And I think Notre Dame can restock the receiver room, the guys that are developing in the program, and bringing in some more transfer portal guys potentially who would want to play with CJ Carr. And then so many of your defensive guys will be back next season that I think that that's fair. That 26, 27,
and some really good ones coming in.
Yeah. 27 could be if CJ Carr is still at Notre Dame, or maybe there's the next version of what CJ Carr is right now, because I think this incoming freshman class next year will be in their second years, and that could be a chance for those guys to start really impacting the program, because there is a lot of talent in that class, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the show. All right. Ron Roberts says, Tyler, what is your opinion of CJ's brother who just committed to Michigan? Honestly, I don't know that I've spent much time watching Tommy Carr film, so I don't have an opinion on him.
He swapped out from Miami, Ohio to go to Michigan, huh?
Yeah. Did you miss that yesterday? That happened yesterday.
I did. Yeah, I did miss it yesterday.
So he committed to Michigan. He's a second quarterback commitment in the class. I think Brady Smigel is also in that class. So Michigan we'll take 2 quarterbacks in that class, and it'll be interesting to see.
Tom Lemming loves him.
I think he had a really good senior season. That's unfortunate news for Chuck Martin at Miami of Ohio, who had recruited him early on and got his commitment, but hard to blame a kid upgrading from a MAC program to a Big Ten program. So congratulations to Tommy Carr and the Carr family. Certainly would be awesome if there was a world where CJ and Tommy were playing against each other, but I think that might not happen with the age difference between the two. All right, let's talk a little bit about Syracuse. I know we sort of highlighted how bad they are. What does Syracuse do well, if anything, Eric?
Nothing. Net punting, they're in the top 10. And then everything else is a disaster. And really, when you go back and look at the freeze frame after 4 games, after they beat Clemson 34-21 in the game that Steve Angeli got hurt and suffered a season-ending Achilles injury, everything went down on both sides of the ball after that. I mean, it was just like putting a pin in a balloon and just deflating it. They've really gone backward. And a lot of that has been, they haven't had very good quarterback play. They were a top 10 team in passing offense, and they were way up there in pass efficiency. Right now, they are 50th in pass offense, and they're 102nd in pass efficiency. And defensively, 123rd in total defense. I mean, there's just not a lot you can hang your hat on. They've lost 6 straight games since Angeli went down. Every one of those has been by double digits. So there's just not a lot there. I do think their coach is really good. I think Marcus Freeman was good to shout him out today. I think Fran Brown just as having a lot of things not go their way. I do think they're one of the younger teams in the country in terms of starting experience. I think they're the third youngest in terms of fewest games of starting experience from last year. They'll be better next year, and Notre Dame is going to play them up at Syracuse next year. So, but on Saturday, I wouldn't expect a lot from them.
Yeah, and you mentioned Filardi being named or expected to start as the quarterback. He was 4 of 18 against North Carolina. He did come in at the end of the game against Miami and completed all 3 of his passes, including a touchdown. But Ricky Collins has not been good. After Steve Angeli, he completed just 53% of his passes for 1,042 yards on 181 attempts, 6 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. His passing efficiency was 101.84. Angeli's was 152.32. And for comparison, CJ Carr is 170.9.
And CJ Carr is 3rd in the country.
And you can see the wide gap between quarterback play there. And I think Syracuse has decent receivers. That's something Steve Angeli was taking advantage of, and Syracuse hasn't really been able to take advantage of that since he got injured. We talked a little bit about this on Saturday night after the Pitt game in our post-game takeaways. What would impress you in a Notre Dame performance against Syracuse on Saturday?
Some of the stuff, that's the reason I asked Marcus Freeman about it. Some of it is just really playing to your standard at every position. So winning the turnover battle, just being sharp on offense and defense, not shooting yourself in the foot, and just really shutting Syracuse's offense down. Not that they won't help, but and I think one of the ways that Marcus is able to do this is that Notre Dame plays so many people. So, and the expectation isn't that it's garbage time. It's that this is your time to show us that we're not playing you enough. And so those guys that come into the game, they're ready to roll and contribute. And I think, if you want to score, I mean, it's a 35-point point spread. I'd say Notre Dame has a decent chance to beat that. But again, it's showing that you are a team that's improving. That's what Marcus's goal is. That's what the committee looks at. For example, there's media that say, well, they played Arkansas. Arkansas is a 2-win team. But what the committee does is they look at Arkansas and say, well, what are their scores compared Notre Dame versus the SEC teams that have played them? And Notre Dame beat them worse than any SEC team has, and have held them to season lows. Like you look at the Pitt game, the 175 rushing yards is the most Pitt's given up to anybody this year. So you look at stats like that, and I think those are important in saying, yeah, they didn't play a really good team today, and yet they took care of business, and they took care of it in the right way.
You mentioned the Arkansas deficit or margin of victory or margin of loss, however you want to phrase it. I think, and someone on the loose emoji board pointed this out over the weekend, I think Notre Dame did beat Arkansas by more than all the SEC teams combined have beat them in terms of points. Like if you add the scoring margins of all those, I think it was SM Pep, if I'm remembering that name correctly off of memory, that mentioned that on the loose emoji board. I thought that was an interesting stat. I want to talk a little bit more about the college football playoff picture. First, where do you think Notre Dame will be ranked on Tuesday night?
I would say 9 or 10. It's hard to imagine that they would be higher than 9. I guess they could be ahead of Oklahoma. And it's hard to think that they would be lower than 10. I think 10 is kind of their floor as long as they play well, that they're not going to be any lower. So is Alabama ahead of them? How does the committee slot Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and Alabama? That's, I think, a little bit of a mystery of what's going to happen on Tuesday night. At 8:30, it's a later one.
Yeah, I would predict that it's 10 for Notre Dame. I would be happy. I would be happily proven wrong that Notre Dame or Alabama doesn't fall behind Notre Dame. I think that the committee is going to keep Alabama ahead of Notre Dame, and Oklahoma will jump above Notre Dame. But we'll learn that in about 24 hours. Which teams do you think are worth monitoring in terms of impacting Notre Dame's ranking in the final weeks?
Well, the ones just ahead of them, I don't know that Texas Tech has a loss in them unless it's in their Big 12 championship game. I can't imagine them losing to West Virginia. So really the realistic ones are Oregon, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss, and probably Ole Miss the least likely of those to lose. But Oregon's got 2 potentially tough games, USC at home and then at Washington. Washington's always tough up there in Seattle. And then Oklahoma has Missouri and LSU. And I think something funky could happen to Oklahoma just because they're not very good on offense. You look at their offensive numbers up and down the board, and it's amazing that they've won as much as they have. And then you look at their defense and you go, okay, well, that's why they have. Their defense is really good, but their offense does not look like a playoff offense. Even if John Mateer is 100%, they just haven't played at that level. But kudos to them for beating Alabama. And Alabama, tell you dig into their numbers. I remember last year when I told Tyler I thought Georgia was a good matchup for Notre Dame if Notre Dame ended up with them, and I think he thought I was from a different planet. But Alabama's a team that I think Notre Dame really would match up well against.
Yeah, I think you spent more time looking at the other teams than I have, but I do think there are some teams that Notre Dame would have favorable matchups against. I think some of those concerns that we have about those other teams could get exposed against, depending on what team Notre Dame is drawn against. But it'll be interesting to see. Like sometimes the best seeding doesn't, or your best path isn't necessarily being the best seed possible. So that will certainly come into play. Something that came up this evening that I started to think about. So Lane Kiffin is seemingly considering the jobs at Ole Miss and Florida. Pete Nakos of On3 said members of Kiffin's reported that members of Kiffin's family visited Gainesville on Sunday and Baton Rouge on Monday. And Brett McMurphy of On3 also reported if Lane Kiffin doesn't meet a deadline, Ole Miss would have to decide if it would allow him to coach in the playoffs, sources told on 3 Sports. If there is no resolution, it will be an agonizing decision for Kiffin and the Rebels. So I'm this is jumping a few steps ahead, but I'm curious. Like we've seen in the past, the committee weighed like a quarterback not being available for Florida State. Like, would Ole Miss not having its head coach impact its ranking? What do you think of that?
Yeah, we would be looking at new territory. I think it could impact their seeding. I mean, not whether they got in or not. And then you wonder if all this happened before the Egg Bowl, if it would affect the team in that game. Mississippi State has been pesky against some teams and then like not pesky against other teams. But at times they've challenged some top 25 teams. And they also beat Arizona State, which is one of the better Big 12 teams when Arizona State was at full strength. I want to note, too, when on the potential best and worst matchups, I did a story on that. My Behind the Ballot column that's on at blueandgold.com breaks down the 5 teams Notre Dame would want to see, the 5 teams they'd least want to see, and then I have a mystery team that could fit in either category.
We like mystery teams better than mystery meat. Shepard has a couple of questions regarding Ohio State that we sort of throw together. Where is the best seeding for Notre Dame to avoid Ohio State in the second round? And do we have to root for Michigan to beat Ohio State again to avoid Ohio State early in the playoffs?
Well, even if Indiana beats Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, then those two would flip-flop and you'd have Ohio State as the 2, or I guess the 3 maybe. But and you'd have Indiana number 1. But let's say Ohio State lives up to being the number 1 team in the country. I was talking about this, and I wrote this in the Sunday column. I think 10 is a better place to be than number 9. Now, if you have 8 and you can get a home game, that's a different story. But then you'd hit Ohio State in the second round. You'd also do that as the 9 seed, but you'd have to go on the road to play somebody, and then have to play Ohio State in the second round. I think when you looked at some of the mock brackets, again, you're not picking victims, you're picking poison, but I think the side away from Ohio State is the way to go. Last year, I thought Ohio State, Oregon, Tennessee were the 3 teams I thought were the worst matchups for Notre Dame. I think right now, Indiana, Ohio State first, Indiana, and then Oregon. And that seems strange given what Oregon's done this year. But again, it's about matchups, not who's the 3rd best team. And Oregon matches up really well with Notre Dame. Now, their numbers may be inflated by their schedule, but I'd say draw away from those 3, and if you can, and I don't know that it's possible to draw away from all 3 of them, but who knows? There could be some funny stuff. Maybe Purdue has some shenanigans up their sleeve.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. I wanted to quickly hit, I know we're in overtime here, quickly hit some, or I guess the recruiting news of the day as it relates to Notre Dame. And that was the rankings update by Rivals. Offensive tackle Charlie Thom and defensive lineman Elijah Golden both moved into the Rivals 300. Notre Dame now has 6 of its commits in the top 32. The top 32 is notable because 32 is the number of 5-star recruits that will eventually be in the 2026 class, or in every class, but Rivals has not yet extended its number of 5-stars that far out yet. That includes Grayson McHugh at 9, offensive tackle, edge Rodney Dunham at number 10 overall, cornerback Kari Adams at number 23, safety Joey O'Brien, who's the number 1 safety at number 25 overall, tight end Ian Premer, who's the number 1 tight end at number 27 overall, and Ebenezer Iwatade at number 28 overall, and he's the number 7 edge. And defensive back commit Aiden Pouncey moved in the top 100. We're a couple weeks away from signing day, or the early signing period starting, and there's no signs of Notre Dame dropping out of the top 5, which is sort of the mark that it's been really hard for.
Where are they now with all these changes?
I believe that according to Rivals rankings itself, Notre Dame has the top class. I believe in the Rivals industry ranking, I think they're 4th. But obviously there'll be a lot of changes between now and then for other recruiting classes. So we'll see how that impacts the rankings. There's been very little noise or movement as it relates to Notre Dame commits and guys possibly leaving. I think that speaks highly of the direction this program is heading in and the job Notre Dame has done in identifying guys that want to be a part of what Marcus Freeman has going on here. So we'll have plenty of recruiting coverage to get into in the next couple of weeks. Mike Singer and Kyle Kelly always have you covered over at blueandgold.com with more information there. We appreciate everyone joining us here tonight. We'll be back with a Third and Gold podcast later this week, and everyone enjoy their week.